start that. So thank you all for coming this afternoon to today's lecture, sponsored by the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies. With us is Chris Nighman, and he's going to talk about the Manipulus Florum, the Electronic Manipulus Florum project, as well as a new project that he has going on that I don't know anything about, and I'm very excited to hear about it. We'll also be looking a little bit at our Manipulus Florum manuscript that we recently acquired here at Penn. And so I'm going to let Chris offer some more introduction about himself and just pass it on to him.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you for the invitation, Dot, and it's a terrific turnout. You said there was excitement and interest, and it's an impressive turnout, so thank you for coming. I'm a historian, so in the last 20 years or so, we've kind of gotten back into narrative, and so I think I'll sort of tell the story of how I came to the project, and then at some point I'll slip into the manuscript and then perhaps slip back out and back and forth. We'll see how it goes. I don't have a structured presentation in mind, more of a more free-flowing sort of presentation. My doctoral thesis, University of Toronto, 1996, was a study of the sermons delivered by an English preacher at the Council of Constance, 1414 to 18. And he was the most prolific preacher in the English delegation, delivering at least 5, possibly as many as 7 full-length sermons, including 3 or 4 eulogies and the rest feast day sermons, over the course of only 10 months, which is very busy for an English preacher at Constance. The next runner-up, the Bishop of Salisbury, gave 4 addresses over 3 years. And the other English preachers that we know gave only 1 address the entire time they were there. So the council ran for 4 years. So it was a close study of those sermons. I edited 4 of them. And in the process of doing the editing, critical editions from manuscripts, I started to find quotations that were just hard to locate, or if I did locate them, they looked like paraphrases. And yet they were cited in such a way that suggested that this is coming from somewhere. It's not just a recollection on his part. He's not just fudging it. And then at some point, I'm not even sure now how it happened, I was going through the Rouse's book, the seminal study of the Manipulus Florum, and there's my guy as a former owner of a manuscript copy of the Manipulus Florum. So I thought, aha, this is probably where those fudgy non-quotations are coming from. And so went to the Bodleian Library and looked at the manuscript copy of his actual copy, which he left in Lincoln College Library, now resides in the Bodleian Duke Humphreys Library. And also pulled up, just for convenience sake, because I didn't have a lot of time there, an early imprint of the same text. The second edition from Venice, 1494 to 6. And then realized, yes, indeed, he did use this, and this explains a lot of those strange quotations and misattributions and so on in some of these sermons. In particular, in 2 eulogies, and I've since published articles describing those eulogies and his reception of the Manipulus Florum in writing them, and how its utilitarian nature in particular was key when, in my view, he rewrote the sermon at the last minute in order to deliver a political statement that impacted current events at that council. So, having finished the thesis, still being in love with sermons, I thought florilegia are pretty cool. Not a lot has been done on them. There are a lot more out there than have been closely studied. There have been a few editions of some of the less prolific ones, but not the Manipulus, which seems to be the big one. There are almost 200 manuscripts, 201. There are 50 known editions from 1483 to 1887. So it continued to be used, but it was never, those 19th century editions are simply reprints. They're not critical editions. They're not attempts to rectify the text or to establish a critical version of the text. So, a good friend of mine, Jim Ginther, electronicgrosstest.com, had set up this great web resource, and I said, I got to get me some of that. And my wife said, she said, you got to get you some of that. And so I said, well, the sermon stuff, yeah, I can see how putting that stuff online might be useful. In fact, there is now a sermones.net, which is on Mesa. It's in its infancy at this point, but I'm sure it'll grow. But the Manipulus forum seemed like a really good thing to run with on this. 12 years later, last July, I wrapped up the critical edition. And this is, in fact, from the website, from one of the few illuminated manuscripts of the Manipulus. And it is just this historiated initial A. This is the website project. And this is the list of topics, it's an index of sorts, that details the 266 lemata into which Thomas of Ireland divided the 5,621 entries in this text. Not quotations, because he combined proverbs under a single entry in many cases. So probably closer to 6,000, which is what the Rouse is estimating as well. And the number after each is how many quotations fall under that particular topic. And to give you a better sense of that, our good friends at Wordle help me put this together. So the big topic here is death. 97 quotations. Followed closely by friendship. Amicizio.
That's nice.
94 quotations. Correctio, doctrina is big, oratio is big, relatio is big. All of the 7 virtues and 7 vices corresponding are here. Lots of stuff on education. Lots of stuff on theological issues. The smallest quotation, or the smallest topic, actually, and I still haven't found it, but it must be here somewhere, is usury, with only 2 quotations in Surah, for reasons that I'm not sure why that is the case, but anyway, each of these is linked to the critical edition. Each of these is linked to PDF files, which give you the best edition of the modern source. Although Gennadius actually has been edited more recently than Mignon's 19th century edition, PL, and so that will be an update. So when I say I finished last July, I mean I finished transitioning from the transcription of the 1494 edition to a critical edition based on the manuscripts for all of the text. But there will be updates and there will be ongoing changes and so on, I'm sure, for years to come. Also noted are variants between the 3 manuscripts that were collated for this and 5 early imprints. And this is kind of a skinny one. Some of them are really thick on the variants. And some of the quotations are quite thick too. I think the shortest one's probably 6-7 words, so it's an aphorism, it's a proverb. Some of them are textual excerpts of considerable length, a paragraph. Usually I'm fitting about 6 of these per page, but sometimes it's just 1 or 2, sometimes up to 10 or 11. Project description walks you through. So at first it was just this transcription. Then after June 2002, I moved on to the critical edition, explaining the apparatus documents, which are all searchable with Google Open Access. The search engine. Okay, this is the exciting part, I think. So the Janus Intertextuality search engine, which I'm going to demonstrate as well. So I'll open up a file. Currently working on transcribing and editing another florilegium. And here is a bit of it. It's a 19th century non-copyrighted source from the 13th century. So it's a string of quotations here. I'll just do a bit. back to Janus. And instead of a keyword search, we'll just paste in the whole thing and generate an intertextuality report. So these are the quotations that show up in these two different collections of quotations. And they're ranked according to their likeliness. Down at the bottom of the page, you get what are clearly some coincidences, right? But we didn't, in setting up the parameters for the search engine, we didn't want to exclude very short quotations. So the only way that we could make sure that that would not be those things wouldn't be lost is to allow things this small to actually show up.
So is what this doing, is this comparing, you paste some text in and then it compares it with your Manipulus florum?
That's right.
And tells you where they're the same.
Right, and in fact, each of these identifiers for the Manipulus florum quotation is linked to the apparatus.
That's awesome.
So, and then you can make this smaller and you can compare the three texts. There's a new version that's going to come up that's going to take your text when it hits on one here, and it'll produce a 3-column comparison. That's going to take a little code writing that I can't do. But I've got some great collaborators at the University of Waterloo who put this the search engine together for us. Lots of auxiliary materials on this as well. So what is the Manipulus florum? Tragic rationale, description we already looked at. There's a 1550 edition. Good story here. So I was collating 5 early imprints from 1483 to 1557. And the 4 of them were really easy to acquire microfilm copies of. Cheap, easy to get, good quality copies, no problem. But this 1550 Venice edition, the 3rd printed edition, was very expensive and hard to find. Ironically, more so than the 2 incunibles that were not so hard to find. And so I gave up because it was going to be too expensive. It was like $500 for microfilm. No way. The title here, Flores Omnium Fere Doctorum, is a unique title in the print transmission. Subsequent editions, building off the 1550 Venice edition, Flores Omnium Penne Doctorum, meaning essentially the same thing. Flowers of nearly all the doctors, a whole bunch of them. This one is unique, and one time, just on a whim, I Googled this title, and I hit a used bookseller in the Netherlands that was selling an actual copy for a lot less than the microfilm. So absolutely, my order went straight out. So I have a copy of it. I had it in my office for a few years while I was working on it. And then my colleague on the floor above mine had a flood. His entire office, all the books were soaked. And so that put the fear of God into me. And so I donated it to the university library. And so they let me take it out whenever I want. But I bring it back the same day. And I never check it out if there's weather threatening. So it's a terrific copy. It's smaller still than this. It truly is a pocketbook in the format, octo. And it is a terrific text. It has a new introduction, a new preface, which I reproduced here. I haven't transcribed this, but it supplants the preface, the proemium that Thomas of Ireland wrote, and which survives in most of the manuscripts. Unfortunately, not this one.
Do you know who put that edition together?
Yes. Someone who had a printing house called At the Sign of Hope in Venice in 1550. Otherwise, we don't know who. The reason I'm so excited about this is because that it has its own page, not just because of my fun story, but because the editor of the 1550 edition ameliorated the text. So it's an active engagement with certain quotations which she improved in some way. Extended, filled in a gap in the middle, corrected passages, and then this is all detailed in various PDF files, this one. So we've got the Manipulus Florum from Venice 1493, the approximate source for the 1550 edition. We've got the original text here in its modern edition, and then we have the 1550 edition here. And double underscore is where he went away from the modern edition, and single underscore is where it aligns with. So change the title down here. There are all kinds of little indicators. Some of them are much more interesting than this. I should have made a couple of notes so I could go straight to it. Anyway, back to the main page. And this is the stable URL, but it's manipulusforum.com. Will link you straight into it. That's how I advertise it on all publications. Well, because electronic editions don't carry the same weight as printed books, articles for tenure committees and hiring committees and such, I thought it was a good idea to get some testimonials up so there are eminent historians would like it and say so. And the danger, of course, of having an actual guest book page is that it gets spammed all the time, and you're in there constantly cleaning it out. So they just send me emails, and I say, "How's this?" And they say, "That's great," and up it goes. Links. So these are resource websites which link the Manipulus Forum project. Some at my suggestion, others picked it up on their own. And here are some other things that I like very much, including Mesa, including the Petrus Powell Electronic Critical Edition, which is on Mesa. And the reason I'm showing you this is because this is what I aspire to. This, I think, is a model online critical edition of the text by Jeffrey Witt. Oh, don't be shy. And what I like about this is every paragraph, oh, there it is, the paragraph menu. Drops down. Manuscript images for the 4 manuscripts that are collated for this edition. And he invites comments. So if you disagree with his rendering of the text, you can submit a comment. You can, after you prove that you're a human being. And then there's a blog which records the interaction between you and the editor, and whether he's going to reject your suggestion or accept it. I think it's a terrific collaborative online effort. It's got all kinds of other great stuff too. I invite you to take a look at this website if you're at all thinking about developing your own critical edition of Latin text or otherwise. He used Yuxta to put this together. Ceremonies.net, also from Mesa, sharing ancient wisdoms.
Which we're hoping to get into Mesa, actually.
Isn't it?
It's not in Mesa yet,
Oh.
but we're hoping to get it in.
Sharing ancient wisdoms.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
Ceremonies.net is in there.
Yeah.
But sharing ancient wisdoms is not.
Well, I have to thank Doc for putting me onto this and introducing me to the principals at King's College London and the Digital Humanities program there. Sharing ancient wisdoms is about florilegia from the Byzantine, Greek, and Islamic traditions. And they're doing terrific work there. And it was very instructive to meet with them and to share our love of these anthologies of wisdom literature. This is something I use all the time, and it's a growing resource. Glosse.net. The thing I use it for is for the Glossa Ordinaria, that's the ordinary gloss on the Bible. They use the 1480 Strasbourg edition by Adolf Roche, and they've got the whole thing online. And they are transcribing and editing it piecemeal, so it's a progressive edition. Terrific resource, but some of this other stuff is going to be great too. The Ulyssen Share, Apostles on the entire Bible, Peter Lombard. When all this stuff comes together, it's going to be a terrific thing. I'm not sure why they're doing the Catena Aurea by Aquinas, because it was done, of course, by our Lord and Master, the beginner of it all, Roberto Lusa. Right, so this is the original online open source resource, and it still is very useful.
Does everyone know about Roberto Lusa? It was like the first digital humanities project started in the 1940s, and he partnered with IBM.
Yep.
and they did, it was Aquinas, all of the works of Aquinas, what do you call it? The Concordance. And they did it on punch cards. And it took them like 30 years to do it on punch cards, but they still, now it's on, is it online now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's good trivia to know. Roberto Bussa, first digital humanist.
And
And he
there's
was
a
a
Busa
medievalist.
Prize that comes out every 2
Yes.
years, right? It's,
Yeah.
it's the Academy Award of DH.
Yeah.
And there's something new coming. I've been in touch recently with Sophie Delma, and they're doing a online biblical distinctions under Marjorie Burger. That's going to be a terrific resource.
That's going to be great.
And if you want to see someone slamming digital humanities, Adam Kirsch's review article in the New Republic came out beginning last month, just a month ago. There's a response, it's actually a defense of the digital humanities that came out a week before in print by Kirschbaum, I think is his name, yeah. So cherry picking is kind of the joke about this, that he picks on particular DH projects that he thinks are frivolous. And his name is Kirsch, German for cherry. And I think that's, Margot is just down the street at the University of Waterloo. It's a consortium of various online texts. And this is the Busa project.
Oh, yeah.
So it's got everything. Pope Romeo. Okay, so back to my stuff. Acknowledgements, student RAs who contributed to the project, funding agencies and so on, librarians and libraries and librarians, and fellow scholars who have given me tips and advice and so on over the years are acknowledged there. Annotated bibliography is constantly updated. We'll skip right down to the most recent stuff. I'll talk briefly about things to watch for. The big locus for the study of medieval florilegia is at Madrid, and there's a Grupo de Investigación for the study of anthologies and florilegia there, under Maria Jose Munoz. And so here she's studying the construction of the topic eloquence in the Manipulus florum. We have one of her comrades there studying the reception of Aegidius in the Manipulus florum. He's heavily quoted both under Bellum and Blitzia. And those two are the most classicizing of all of Lamada, more classical than patristic and medieval authors for obvious reasons. Mark Sells, actually this is out now. I can update the bibliography. Studies Era in the Manipulus florum. This is out in the Journal of the Society of Canadian Medievalists, Florilegium. And then my own piece that's coming out, Manipulus florum, Johannes Nieder's Formicarius and Late Medieval Misogyny in Journal of Medieval Latin will be out in the fall. And something else by Maria Jose as well, Marshall. So this might be a good time to flip to the manuscript. So notes here. So marriage is a topic within the Manipulus florum. Beginning here. Just drop the snake across. How's that looking? Okay. So beginning here, and running down the right side in rubric is the abbreviation for the authors. So Augustine always comes first for Thomas of Ireland. Ambrose is next, then Jerome. Gregory the Great, Isidore, and so on. And then running down the other margin will be the letters that are assigned to each quotation or entry, so A, B, C, D, E, and so on. And then we've got running headers across the top. And jumping to the back of Compendium, give you a sense of the information technology that's being implemented here. I'm going to have to pull it open, I think. Okay, so we have, at the end of each topic, at the end of the last quotation, ubi. Ubi castitas D and O, mulier, peccadum F, and we're C, and virginitas A, I, and C. So it's we're and then virginitas down there. So these are cross references. If you're interested in more stuff about marriage, go to these two quotations under chastity. All of mulier, all of woman, peccadum F, and virginity A, I, and no, that'd be T, not C. A, T. This is one of the reasons that this is such a popular text, we think, is that it had this terrific organization. It's got running headers, it's got authors in a regular presentation. The quotations aren't too long, they aren't too short. More importantly, it's got this cross-referencing system. Now, Thomas didn't create, according to the preface, he didn't create the cross-referencing system in order to help us find these sources. He says that he did it in order to put quotations that he put in the wrong place back where they should be. It's part of his humility trope. But that's the way it worked, and that's why people liked it, was because you could say, well, I've read through Compendium, I couldn't quite find the things I was looking for, so I'll try these others as well. And that's why I think it was so widely received. Now, Compendium, I'll just back up a bit. The title of the Rouse's book, it's right at the top, full title reference. Preachers, Florilegia, and Sermon Studies on the Manipulus Forum of Thomas of Ireland, a seminal study, edited the preface and also the list of authors and works that's at the end of most of the manuscripts, and which corresponds to the Sorbonne collection, which he pillaged to create this thing. The title gives it away, Preachers, Florilegia, and Sermons. The Rouses believe that this was created by Thomas of Ireland as a preaching resource, a handy reference tool when you don't have access to a library, you're composing sermons on the fly, but you've got one of these. It replaces a library for someone who's preaching in the field. In the 13th and 14th centuries, when this book was produced and initially received, there was an explosion of preaching, and it was largely the friars, Dominicans, and the Franciscans who were involved in creating preaching tools and using them. And this is really the explosion of pastoralia, pastoral texts in general, books having to do with preaching and hearing confession in particular. I don't think so. I don't think that Thomas of Ireland created this for preachers. It was used by preachers. In fact, that's how I found out about it. Richard Fleming used it to create sermons. There's no doubt about it. The earliest reception that we know of by someone is a preacher. And this is Christine Boyer's work. It's right here. Where are you, Christine? There it is. The Sermons of Guillaume de Sackville, OP. And soon after it was completed in 1306, they were contemporaries in Paris. They may have even known each other. It was immediately received by a preacher and used for composing sermons, as documented by Christine in her work. But there are a number of things about this text that don't smell right for a preaching manual. And I published on this in 2005 in Medieval Sermon Studies, arguing that it was used, that it was intended for university students to read for their own edification. He says it in the preface, And there are certain things about the way it's organized, emphasis on certain topics, that just doesn't look like a preaching manual, although it was used that way. Well, at the time, I hadn't done Conjugium and Mulier yet. I just hadn't gotten that far in the edition process. When I got there, I realized how thoroughly misogynistic this text is. He has nothing good to say about women, and he even has less good to say about marriage. In fact, I'm arguing in my forthcoming article that women are subsumed within marriage, and that what he's doing is warning university students against falling into the trap of marriage because it will distract you from your studies. He's got quotations that say exactly that. A knowing.
Yeah, Alex is nodding his head back here.
My disinterest.
Why not?
So this is, I think, the nail in the coffin. And Mark Sell's work on Wrath, on Era, also. This is not intended for preaching, not for popular audiences. It reflects university concerns that were very much intramural, not for the wider preaching mission. And I think there's going to be some more stuff coming along that's going to further support my work there. So, is there more that I want to say about the Manipulus? Back to the manuscript. The beautiful thing in the manuscript is when initials are the first foray for a letter. So you can see how much more elaborate and robust the decoration is here for baptismus, for the initial B. And then subsequent letters under B will be plain, more like auditor. But then when we get to C, there'll be another for caritas, another elaborate initial signs. And I think these decorations firmly place this in Paris. These are the colors, these are the decorations. I'm not a codicologist or paleographer by profession, but it looks very Parisian to me. And we know that the Manipulus Forum was systematically reproduced by the Paris stationers using the Pecchia system. The Rouses did terrific work on this, and no one knows better than they the production of manuscript books in Paris in the 13th and 14th centuries. Some other interesting things that I had an opportunity to go through the manuscript earlier, there are some missing choirs. And the first one I found is 58V. When I saw a lovely catchword. So curiositas down here, and then here's the catchword, marking the end of the choir, and the first word on the next choir should be latifunda, but it's not. And in fact, you can see just by the running headers that we jump from curiositas to delitiae and desiderium, leaving out the end of curiositas, damnum sive damnatio, debitum decima, and the beginning of delitiae. And there are a few more missing choirs likewise. So we don't get a robust initial Q or R, but not because of a missing choir, but because of another reason that manuscript lovers will hate universally. And I think it's a deliberate destruction of the page. So pusillanimitas goes on, rapina, that's not a break in the text, but there would have been a capital R here and a capital Q here as well.
Oh, so they cut out two.
Yeah. No, Q and R. Q,
Yeah, two.
There's only
yeah,
one
two letters.
under Q, querere deum, and then the first rapina would have been beautifully done too. And there's a bit of gold leaf, but I don't think that's the reason. I think it's just invidia. They just wanted it, or avaritia, more likely. Other interesting things about the manuscript. It's a lovely thing to behold. I think it is 14th century. The explicit is unique. So, explicit manipulus florum peritorum. I've never seen that before. Here ends the handbook of flowers of experts, of those who know, right? And this book is a little flower of hands. You want to make a stab at that? Because it's the same scribal hand all the way through, so it's not a collaborative scribal effort. Is it just a bizarre typo?
Was he copying it from?
No, I haven't seen it in any other place. I haven't gone through the Rouse's catalog carefully and read
Right.
all the explicits, but I think it's an unusual one. Corrections in the manuscript, most of them are the scribe, him or herself, and there's some neat examples of it. Auto-correction on 4.6, or 4R rather. So you can see running down the page, got quotation, NOP, and then jumps to S. And then here's Q and R provided down here, same hand. But there are some corrections by another hand. 21R, as an example. So here's an omitted word, and the caret midline. And it's applied there, different ink, different hand, everything about it. And another thing I found kind of curious about this, it'll be something I look for when I see more manuscripts. 45V. One of the things that Thomas did was supplied dummy entries. And here's a nice example in the running header. So you have the end of contemptus, the beginning of contritio, and in between you have contentio, contention, ubi discordia. So we don't actually have contention here, but if you want stuff on that, go to discordia. And the same with continencia, go to castitas. Now, those are in those dummy entries are found in the list of the lemata at the back of the manuscript. But I've never seen them in a header before. So that's an interesting feature of this particular manuscript. Again, I'm not sure how common that is, but usually the header just tells you, what's on the page, not where else to go for something else.
And that's the same hand, right? It looks like it was written, same hand, same ink. So it was probably written there at the same time that the manuscript was.
Although if it's peristationers, maybe not.
Oh, right.
But they all train together. They all have very similar hands. There could be more than one hand in here, but they're pretty consistent across the board.
Mm-hmm.
It is a terrific manuscript. It's got all kinds of problems, which I think make it all the more interesting, because of course it just adds to its uniqueness. So I had a colloquium in Waterloo on 2 weeks ago, and we had 11 speakers. The abstracts are available in English and French. There's a French page that's linked to this as well. I also made a digital humanities presentation, which is the thing I'm going to segue into now. We did a live webcast, and we had remote viewers from across North America who participated by sending questions through social media or just using the Adobe Connect communication link. And it was a good experience, I think.
Yeah, I think we saw it sort of right after. I mean, we saw an announcement that came right before it happened, but didn't see it until after.
Well, we recorded.
Oh, great.
And we have the audio. We're trying to get the video out of the grad student's laptop. And if we can do that, we're going to put it up on YouTube, and there'll be links to each of the speakers' names below.
Yeah.
And The book is expected to be out in 2016 with Pontifical Institute of Medieval Studies publications. The other thing in the new box is the Compendium project. So, having finished the Manipulus Forum project, I had told the vice president academic and the dean and my chair that I was going to go back to the constant sermon stuff and return to work that I'd mothballed 6 or 7 years ago. But I'm actually leaving that behind. The florilegia stuff is just too interesting. Maybe someday, maybe retirement, I don't know. But in the meantime, there's a lot to be done with florilegia. The Compendium moralium notabilium is a terrific collection, published only once, 1505, unlike the Manipulus, which was 50 times up to the 19th century. Survives in about 60 manuscripts, we think. There are probably more. If I do some more digging, I'll try to come up with a definitive list. What's interesting about it is that, and we can go take a look because there are multiple copies by Google Books. This is one of the worst copies because it's got wormholes through it. It's a new name. It's the Epitome of Wisdom now, not the Compendium moralium notabilium, the Compendium of Notable Morals. And there's the preface and the list of authors, and then we get right into the quotations. And I've reproduced that list of authors to create an index. And this is one of the remarkable things about this collection and what makes it different from the Manipulus Forum in so many ways. But this one in particular is interesting. He lists the quotations not by authority, Augustine first, Seneca last, but by chronological order. Now, not hard and fast, close, we would disagree with some of the organization here, but he does start with the Old Testament and then move into the Greek philosophers and then get into the Romans and then the New Testament and then the later Roman poets and authors. Canon law looms large. Early Christian medieval writers, and then right up to the very last stuff is the Proverbia Vulgaria. It's the only Latin florilegium I know of, and I think I'm pretty safe in saying this, that also contains vernacular material. So these are popular proverbs in the Paduan dialect. This text, Montanarius Paduanus, is not our Montanarius, not the author of this collection, but another person of the same name and location. It's the only text we have for it are the excerpts here in this. The actual original text doesn't survive, as far as we know. The quotations from Catullus, which I have not linked here yet, are the earliest quotations from Catullus in any medieval text. He had access to a Carolingian manuscript which no longer survives. So the witness to those particular quotations from Catullus in this text are hugely important for modern critical editions of Catullus, because he's a witness to a lost manuscript that was very early. We've already started working on this, and so we've got transcriptions. No, not transcriptions, but actually edition. But it's an edition of the 1505 edition, not of manuscripts. That's the next step. And so Cicero, and you can see how things are being pasted together here. What is also interesting is the kind of topics. So he starts off with religion and things pertaining to religion. Big topic, lots of stuff to talk about here. Goes on to virtues and vices. Lots of emphasis here on moral theology, just like in Manipulus Forum. The difference is the orientation is completely different. Thomas of Ireland, Paris, theologian, priest, Geremia da Montagnone, layman, lawyer, municipal judge, and he's involved with the proto-humanist literary circle that is sort of the harbinger of the Renaissance proper. So it's considered an early humanistic text, and really the major early humanistic florilegia, perhaps not just the major, really the only one. And that it stands sort of at the transition from the medieval florilegium into the humanist commonplace book. The organization historically, there are some critical things here too. He refers to the ancient venerable Roman poets as poetae, but he refers to medieval poets as versologi, somewhat lesser example of the poetic art. And so there's a sense of the Renaissance disdain for the Middle Ages and preference for the classical period. Big topic here on war, and I've got an incoming grad student who's going to be working for me, hopefully as an RA if I get funding, and who is interested in this stuff on war. Is on the next page, I think. Eloquence, big thing for a judge, makes sense. Love and sex and power and kinds of crazy things. But here on war and hostility and the art of war, the art of making war, it's huge. It goes on and on and on. And it's almost completely excerpts from the Gedius and Frontinus. So almost exclusively classical. Every once in a while, Augustine, somebody on just war or something slips in, but it's almost a completely classically constructed approach to war. And I think what's interesting and quite different from Thomas Byron's approach, as in so many other things, the differences between the Manipulus Florum and the Compendium are much more interesting than the commonalities, and I think instructive as well about the shift from scholasticism to humanism, from the Middle Ages to the early modern period, and so on, and from a ecclesiastical to a secular outlook.
So, can I just ask a quick question? What is the time difference between the time that Thomas of Ireland's Manipulus Florum was written?
1306.
And this was written in
1310.
Yeah, so they were like written at the same time, but completely
different worlds.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's what I think is one of the coolest things about it.
Yeah.
So this is the new edition project, and what I want to do is make it searchable with Janus. So the next version of the intertextuality search engine will allow you to choose either the Manipulus Florum or the Compendium or both, and maybe 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 other florilegia. Because what people are starting to do with the Janus search engine is not just determine Thomas of Ireland's construction of topics or his reception in later authors. They're starting to use it just to edit Latin texts, instead of dialing up the very expensive commercial databases like the Corpus Christianorum and PL and so on, because they are commonplaces. They're things that show up over and over again in lots of places. You might be, if you're editing a Latin sermon from the 15th century, you might be able to do 90% of the quotations you can find with that envisaged resource, and then run off to the library and dial up the commercial database. So that's, and I think also the value of that kind of project, I mean, that's the utilitarian value for Latin text editors, but also we'll be able to really say definitively, these are commonplaces, and these aren't. These are unique. Only one of the 8 florilegia that we looked at here has this particular passage, but 5 of the 8 for this other one, this is a commonplace. This is something that is recurrent. And I think people have been using the term, oh, this is a commonplace, because I've seen it a few times. Well, but did medieval people think that way too? Now we can start to get at that question. Or we will, not now.
When this is done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it all depends on how much money gets thrown at it, how many people I can hire to help me, how many course releases I can get, that kind of thing. Early retirement, maybe. So that's the state of the question. And if you have any questions or comments?
Have there been projects using the Electronic Manipulus Florum where people are just using it for something you never
intended it for.
intended it for.
Just like Thomas didn't intend it used by preachers, but there they go. Yes, and it's nice when people share that with me. But sometimes I just find it on my own because I ego surf all the time on Google to see what's turning up. And if I can just go back to that that bibliography. Go back to here. No, I'm still in the Compendium. The annotated bibliography. Yes, quite recently. Brian Maxon's book just came out, and Google has provided 75% of it online. And happily, references to my project was in the 75% that actually got made into Google Books. And so I looked it up, and so he's used it for, actually he's used it sort of for the purpose I intended it for, but people are telling me that they're using it as a shortcut for editing Latin text. So, I mean, I'm most interested in the people who are looking at the construction and reception of the text, but it does have these wider uses.
So I was wondering about, it looks like you have, I don't know if this is a good way to put it, you have sort of a step-by-step approach. So you start by, I'm going to find an old edition and transcribe it, and then I'm going to come back and do my own edition and replace it.
Yep.
When you do that, do you save the PDFs of the old edition, or like are they available? I don't know if anyone would want them, but or do you just sort of toss them somewhere?
Well, for the Manipulus Florum, it was the 1494 Venice edition, which is collated in the apparatus. So
okay,
it
so
exists
it's all
in that
there.
form.
Okay.
And I've got it on my laptop. I
Right.
can bear to delete it.
Right, but if I went to the website, I could find it. It would be in the apparatus.
You would have to find it bit by bit,
Right.
not the entire document, yeah.
Right.
Because also there are mistakes. I mean, I found transcriptional errors as I was going through, so I really don't want to make that a public source anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I thought you were going to say, but wouldn't a purist amongst editors think that starting with the transcription, then looking at the manuscripts is kind of working ass backwards? It is, but I think it's defensible because this is the process of, this is the beauty of an online project, is that you do a progressive edition. You make things available as they come out, and people don't have to wait for the book until the definitive thing comes out. And just reflecting back on Jeffrey Witt's project, the Peter Plow, he, for every single paragraph, one of the apparatuses is how to cite it. And every time he changes it, it's a new version. And the date is embedded in the new version name.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way to do a progressive edition. It's not something I did, it's something I will do. It makes perfect sense. You've got to do that.
Yeah.
Because it will evolve over time. It's a fluid edition in that sense. It will change. Nothing else I have to standardize the orthography in the Manipulus Florum because I changed my mind a couple times in progress. To go back and redo things would have been way too busy. So get it done first and then go back and standardize, including citations.
And I think there's a lot more of that kind of editing happening with electronic editions, I think Jeffrey Witt does it really in an excellent way with his edition. So if you follow him, then you won't, I think you'll be...
Right, but he didn't start with a printed edition. I don't think there was a printed
No, I
edition.
don't think he did.
He's going straight from manuscripts.
Yeah.
On the printed editions, is there something that explains the immense popularity in the 16th century? I was just looking at the list now between like 1550 and 1600, like 30 different editions in print. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are two incunables, and then there's a big jump. There are a big until 1550, and that's when Erasmus's Adagio was out, and then it went on the index, and I think that's what spurred this as an alternative, a thoroughly orthodox alternative to it. And the print history is largely in Catholic Europe through the 16th and 17th centuries. There are a couple of editions in the Rhineland, in Protestant areas, but not England, not the Lutheran parts of Germany.
thinking about things that whether or not they are unique to our copy or that particularly interesting about our copy. In first off, I should say the electronic version was incredibly helpful when first trying to pull together a catalogue description of the thing and working out why particular folios had been torn, as the Sotheby's description would call it. They were certainly not torn, they were cut, and which folios, what had been likely to have been removed from which folios, and so cross-comparing the actual manuscript with an iPhone that had the Electronic Manipulus project open on, we worked out which always illuminated as I think it's always illuminated initials that are cut from it, when 8 of them were 20 and 8 are removed, they're all illuminated, I think. So it was a tremendous resource for that in the reading of the book.
Again, an unintended use of the project.
Huge help. But also thinking about the table of contents section that's at the end, and the cross-referencing both on the page but also at the end, trying to work out at the time, before I kind of twigged to what it actually was, the entry, abbreviation, further entry in, I think it's 197 or something like that, right at the very end for the tabular florum, where there'll be something like, middle column of the right-hand folio, Fortuna V, abbreviation touched in red. So something like
it's like
that.
6 from the top, I think, in the middle, right? Fortuna,
Yeah, every time
something.
there's an entry, and then there's a wee V with a little rubricated touch with red, and then something else. And before I figured out that it was like a CF kind of.
It's Ubi.
Ubi.
Oh, yeah.
These are the dummy entries.
That's the Ubi.
So there is no Furtum.
Yeah.
But if you want something on Furtum, go to Rapina.
They go to that. Is that a common practice in your experience and knowledge in a table of contents, in an index rather than on the page itself? Because having this at the back of the book helped to work out what was lacking or what had been chopped out and what was missing from it now, giving a snapshot of its original.
I think it's one of the innovations that Thomas and Ireland made use of here. None of these were brand new information technologies. He just combined them in a really effective way with a nice body of material. And that's the popularity, I think, is explained by that.
Do you know, are there any other, because there are so many manuscript copies of it, are there any other libraries who push with interest to adding what they have in their manuscript copies to a collected edition online resource? Because there are 3 all French manuscripts.
Right, the former Sorbonne manuscripts that are 2 of them in the Bibliothèque Nationale, the other in Mazarin. Right, well, I'm going to do as Jeffrey Witt has done and hopefully get permission to reproduce those manuscripts in snippet form for each quotation. And this is Manipulus Point 2.0.
Like I can't remember off the top of my head the browsers list them all, but where they currently reside, like if the BL has 7 of them, is there any interest from the BL, for example, to approach them and say, would you like to compare yours to this online edition and chart any variance, any conformity?
All of the British ones are of an interesting family of manuscripts. The Rouse is identified as the Beta family. And actually my paper at the colloquium was on this topic. And there's a unique, well not unique, it's unique to that family, colophon, which says that here ends the Manipulus Florum by Thomas of Ireland, but it was begun by John of Wales, and Thomas finished it.
That's interesting.
Now the Rouses dismiss that. They think that they don't explain why it got there or how it got there. It gets picked up by a 15th century Florentine bibliographer, and then it gets perpetuated in library catalogs and so on for ensuing centuries. But then the Rouses dismissed it on mainly internal grounds, sort of logical grounds. What I found in doing the edition is that some quotations, in particular, all of the ones by 7 by Aulus Gellius from the Noctes Atticae, are coming to the Manipulus Forum via John of Wales' work. Now, I've also found some other quotations which include lines from John of Wales. The problem is that, and there are 2 books, John of Wales' Compendium and his Communiloquium. problem is that neither has an extant manuscript in from the Sorbonne. It's not in the catalogs. It's not in the current Sorbonne manuscripts in the Bibliothèque Nationale, neither one of them. There is a later copy of one of them, but there's a variant that rules it out. It couldn't have been the source. So what's the connection? Well, could it be that John of Wales did start this and that Thomas picked it up and finished it? Now they're separated by about 10 years. They couldn't have been collaborators, but it doesn't mean that an unfinished project doesn't get picked up by someone who never knew the initiator of the project, and then wraps it up. But that doesn't make sense for other reasons, because some of John's own words, because his florilegia are not strictly quotations, they're linked with commentary of his own devising, and he would know his own words, presumably. So why would that be ending up in this connection? Also at the colloquium, Maria Jose Munoz reported 4 manuscripts from Spain that the Rouses didn't know about. One's a 17th century, heavily adapted version. It throws out lots of stuff and then puts in lots of Latin poets, snippets of Latin poetry, classical stuff. But the other 3 are all 14th century manuscripts, and one of them is a beta manuscript. It has the colophon, but instead of saying, and Thomas finished it, it says, and Thomas shortened it and finished it. He abbreviavit et finit, which is unique. Why would someone invent that? Why would a scribe just say, I'm just going to throw in some extra information? No, I think that's got to be someone who was familiar with the process by which this was compiled. And I think that what we're going to find is that John of Wales, as the Rouses argued, wasn't directly involved in an initial project, but he was heavily pillaged by Thomas of Ireland. And there may have been some kind of work in progress combining material from those other 2 works that he picked up and carried on, but unwittingly transmitted some of John's own words, thinking that they were part of the actual quotation. So that's my forthcoming.
Good. Any other questions?
Can I read that?
After I write it, maybe?
Yeah.
Right now it's here.
All right. Great. Well, thank you. I think